Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, although this is an audio podcast, the video from our chat today mesmerised me because our guest just rocks on so many levels. Not only is she a cool techie, but I also spotted a unicorn drinking wine in the background and also has cracking taste in music. But more on that story later. Her name is Lori MacVittie and she is from a company called F5. And today we're going to be talking about hybrid work and how it's driving a shift to a more identity-centric security. And on that topic, we'll explore IP-based access, what the future means for it, how identity is the way to addressing the security challenges associated with hybrid work, and also the need to expand our understanding of identity beyond people to the workloads, applications and devices we increasingly rely on. But I've revealed far too much already, so buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way stateside and directly into the conversation between me and Lori. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Who I am. I'm Lori MacVittie. I'm the principal technical evangelist. Such a long title for somebody who's just, right? I write things. I know things and I write and I speak. I distill very complex topics into something that's consumable. So if I can explain to my 10-year-old how the internet works, I can explain it to anyone. And I do that for all of the range of F5's products, services, technologies. I take it, I consume it, and then I break it down and make it understandable so that the market gets it, so that our marketing team gets it, right? So anyone can understand what it is that we do.
Before we learn more about your success, I always like to learn a little bit more about my guests and how they got where they are today. So how did you get here? What's your origin story? Where did your passion for tech and wanting to share and talk with people, where did all that come from? What lit the spark?
I'm going to blame or give credit, however you want to see it, to my mother. She was actually a programmer in the 70s when that movement started, where they were teaching everyone to write code. And because of that, she brought an Apple IIe that's currently back through that door.
Wow.
Into the house. And I found out you could program it. You could make it do things and play games because I was a kid. And that kind of spurred this just love of, wow, I can do this. I can make things happen. And it was very logical and it was very exciting and you could see things happening. And I think it just grew after that I can solve problems with code and thinking and logic. And this is so amazing. So never lost it.
And as a kid creating games, were you copying code out of books? Because I used to do that all the time. And it used to take me longer to correct all the syntax errors afterwards. But were you doing that too?
Yes. Both copying BASIC, right? Apple BASIC at the time. Yeah. But also they had the magazines and they would have the actual, the hex, right? So you'd have to go through and do the bytecode and type it in. And yeah, if you made a mistake early on, you had to start over. You learn to be very precise and get it right the first time. You don't want to have to, Montezuma's Revenge was a really long game to type in. Okay, I'm just going to say that right now.
I love it. And of course, everything behind that story, that path led you to F5, which powers apps from development through their entire life cycle. But for anyone listening that are just hearing about F5 for the first time, can you just tell me a little bit more about the kind of problems that you solve for your customers with your tech?
Yes, everything. We don't. Okay. So applications are built without some kinds of functions. Right? They're not built to scale. They're not built to identify bots or, stop attacks or improve how they perform. They don't muck with the TCP stack. They don't do interesting little things to traffic as it's moving to improve the performance or make it more secure. That's what application services, what F5 does, actually provides for applications. It scales them, it secures them, it makes them faster. And it does all of that with different services. that can be deployed in the cloud, in the data center, at the edge, any place. So really, it's about making those applications as secure and fast and available as possible, which is really what's powering today's digital experiences. So everything that we're doing, even Zoom, right? Everything we're doing is, powered by some kind of application and a set of services, and they all need help to scale and be secure and be faster. And that's what F5 does.
And I've got to ask, because I've got a curious mind here, F5, where did the name come from? Is it the keyboard shortcut, or is it something else?
No, and it's not the band that was on Twitter for a while either. That caused some confusion back in the day. So F5, it comes from the Fujita scale, right, for tornadoes. And F5 is, of course, the most powerful, the fastest tornado there is. And so apparently that's where it came from. F5 originally started as a virtual gaming company. And what happened is they found out, wow, this won't scale on the internet. We should build some technology to do that. And suddenly gaming got left behind, and it was all about scale and performance and then security.
Wow, what a cool story. And something I wanted to talk with you about today, one of the reasons I invited you on here, is when it comes to hybrid work, debates continue to rage about who should decide where employees work on any given day, as well as how many days they should be in the office. In fact, I was speaking to someone recently who said that they insist on everyone goes in the office Tuesday to Thursday and everyone works from home Monday to Friday to keep it fair and make sure everyone's in the office at the same time. But I'm curious, that's just one thing I've seen, but what are the kind of patterns that you're seeing in this area?
I see a lot of those different kinds of patterns and across industries. My sister runs a call center, which is very distributed, but they're having that argument now as well, right? To come into the office, why? They've been doing it for 2 years from their homes. So they're having that. We take a very flexible approach, be hybrid, be not, right? We have people around the globe. So a lot of us are remote anyway. So I think I see a lot. I think a lot of it is tied to, how big of an investment you have in that building that you have or buildings, right? I mean, that's a hard thing to give up, right? We built this space for you and you don't want to be here. Oh no, what do you do then? So I think there's a lot of business challenges adjusting to this model. Right? I'm not going to commute. I'm 2,000 miles from the nearest F5 headquartered office. That's a long way. So I've been remote for 15 years with F5 and longer. When I was in publishing, they're also remote. So I kind of watch it. I'm like, you have to ask, what is it that is driving you to want people in the office? Right? Why? And address that. If it's a real business reason, then perhaps you need to be in the office. But if it's merely because you want people together, or that's the only way you know how to collaborate, maybe it's time to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that makes IT teams, in particular security teams, incredibly nervous is how do you secure all this when working from any device, any location and any time, and different networks and devices that are completely outside of their control. So I'm curious, is hybrid work also driving a shift to a more identity-centric security? And can you expand on that and anything that you've seen around that?
Yeah, it's been moving that way, but definitely hybrid work is accelerating that because you can't rely on traditional technologies like VPNs and firewalls because they're very IP-based. They're based on my IP address. Well, that could change.
Yeah.
It's also very large. It gets larger, right, when you're dealing with a hybrid workforce because everyone has their own IP address. How do you codify that and manage it? It's overwhelming. But if you're looking at identity, right, I am Lori no matter whether I'm in the office, at the Starbucks, on the road, or in the office. And you can better secure access based on that identity. And so that we see a lot of the security technologies moving toward that, especially as folks start to realize because there's so much out there and you have to almost assume that something is compromised, you have to move towards zero trust. Where it's really about who are you and what can you have access to. and you pair those instead of worrying about what IP address they came from or what device they're on. Right? It doesn't really matter. It's all about me and what I have rights to access, not what I'm on or where I am.
And with things like airport Wi-Fi, coffee shop Wi-Fi, and 5G connections, do you think that pretty much means the end of IP-based access?
Well, I think there's always going to be some amount of IP-based technologies, access, security. There has to be, right? It makes the internet run. It's not going away. Just we don't have to worry about it so much. But in terms of how we're going to implement that, especially as applications start distributing to the edge, we're going to have to get more identity-centric and worry about who and what, and not so much about that IP because it could change from minute to minute. So I think it's not the end, but I think it's the end in terms of how we secure resources at the application and people layers.
And we've talked about some of the obvious examples that come with hybrid work and the risks around it, but are there any other security challenges associated with hybrid work that interest you more or that you're monitoring closely?
Interest me. I think it's there's the adoption of SaaS, right? Yeah. Everything is moved to SaaS, which is good. And it's great for sharing, but there is an incredible amount of education that has to go on the people side, right? Who you can share with, where you can share with, how you access it, just all of that, because a lot of the leaks of information or data theft often comes from insiders, both knowingly and just accidentally. And so there's a great deal of education that has to go on around that kind of an environment where you're teaching people to be more aware of the kinds of information that they're accessing, where they're storing it, and who they're sharing it to make sure that it's a little less likely it's going to be shared out to the world when it shouldn't be.
And I think the message is quite clear at the moment that businesses all need to start expanding their understanding of identity beyond people to the workloads, applications and devices, etc. But I suppose the big question is, where do they start? How should they do this? I suppose it's a question you get to hear a lot, but is there any advice you could offer around that?
Yes, do it.
Yeah.
You have to start with a strategy at that point. You have to back up. If we just do it ad hoc, we're going to get the same kind of sprawl in security that we have today. Right? We've got 15 different firewall technologies and 8 different identity stores, and trying to consolidate that at the end of the day gets very difficult because there was no strategy. We just bolted things on as problems cropped up. Right now, we know this is coming. So it's time to step back and go, what can we do that will allow us to be able to use the same kind of identity for a workload or for an API or for a person or a device that will feed into a comprehensive access control system that will also allow us to have very fine-grained policies to say, my device doesn't have access to it, but this other device does, or this workload does, those kinds of things. I think you have to approach it strategically, or we're going to end up with a lot of architectural debt that is impossible to pay off.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And I think if we were to all just endlessly scroll down our smartphones at the timelines and news feeds, etc., there's nothing but doom and gloom or warnings of risks and caution and challenges and obstacles around hybrid work and the future of work. But I'd like to try and restore the balance a little bit and add something more positive to the universe out there. So what excites you about the future of work and the role that tech will play? Because there's so much changing at the moment, but for the right reasons and for the better, isn't there?
Yes. I think one of the things that we didn't address when we went to remote work, and I saw this with my son as going through remote learning as well, is that we tried to take the old ways of working and just make them digital.
Yeah.
And the opportunity is to say, we have all these new tools and ways to communicate, different channels, different mediums, new technologies, AR, VR. How can we incorporate that and reimagine how it is that we work together. You can't say, well, we're better face-to-face when we are face-to-face now. I mean, 20 years ago, the only way we communicated live was on a phone. There was no visuals. Today we have video. You can see, right? I'm, throwing my hands around. You can see it when my face says things it shouldn't, and it does. You know that, so you get those clues. And right, that's part of that reimagining how we work. How can we use all this technology to change the way that we work so that it's even better than it was? Right? It's the same thing in technology when you look at automation. Well, automation will make it faster. Yes, but you can make it better. If you look at the process that you're automating and say, are all these steps necessary? Are there things in here we're doing just for the sake of doing them? Let's get rid of them and make it even better. Maybe there's a different way to do it. So every time you have to change or implement a new technology, there is an opportunity to reevaluate how it's been done and whether or not it might be done better by using that technology.
And what about yourself? What's the big focus for you and F5 at the moment? I appreciate there's probably not too much you can share, but is there anything that you're particularly focused on or looking forward to working on over the next year and beyond?
Wow, the next year. So the last year of my life has been focused on working to get a book published about the modernization of enterprise architecture. Right, cool. Across all of IT, so all of the domains, because all of this digital transformation is really kind of putting the spotlight on the IT stack and saying, wow, it was based on really rigid, inflexible, old school ideas, and digital means data and automation and AI and all these exciting technologies. How do we fit that together, right? How do you modernize to take advantage of it? So we spent a year doing that, and now it's time to really kind of zero in on F5's specialty, which is in the app delivery and security space. So when we say modernize that, what do we actually mean? How are we actually going to make that happen for the market and deliver on the promise of we are going to make your apps more adaptive? How are we going to do that? So that's kind of my focus for the next year, is zeroing in on app delivery and moving that forward.
Awesome. And when's that book out? Is it out already? I need to keep a lookout for that.
It is the full digital release is supposed to happen mid-July.
Wow. Okay. And what's the title of it, just for everyone listening, so in case they want to keep a lookout for that book?
It's Enterprise Architecture for Digital Business, and it's from O'Reilly.
Fantastic. Well, we began the podcast talking about your origin story, but as we come full circle, I'm going to ask you now, if we have a bit of fun with you, if there was a song, piece of music, movie, book, or anything that has helped inspire you in your career, just helped you get your head in the zone. Could be anything, really. All I ask is you share a choice and a story behind it to leave everyone listening on an inspirational note. Is there anything you want to add to our Amazon wish list or Spotify playlist?
I don't know. People usually are like, no, that doesn't make any sense when I tell them. But so,
well, I had a guy recently recommend pirate metal on Spotify, so have no fear.
All right,
the sky's the limit.
I have no fear now. So when I started at F5 and I was first asked to give presentations, I was very nervous. It was very hard for me to get up in front of people and talk. I didn't have a lot of confidence. I was always nervous. People aren't going to like what I say. And through the years, that's gone away just from exposure. But I still sometimes need a little boost. That's okay, a reminder that, no, you got this. You know what you're talking about. You belong here. Right? It's overcoming that imposter syndrome. Say, no, you do belong here. So before any presentation, especially a big one, if it's a keynote or on a big stage, I spend some time listening to Pantera.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, respect. And just hammering that for some reason. That song just really, it reminds me, no, you got this. This is, you're okay. So heavy metal. If I need to be reminded that I have confidence and, I know what I'm talking about, it's heavy metal all the way. Just drive it home.
Well, you must be my spirit animal and kindred spirit, because I completely get everything that you just said there. So that's a brilliant choice. And For anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about F5 and anything we talked about today, contacting you, your team, and all that kind of stuff, what's the best starting point? Is it just F5.com?
F5.com is the right portal into the F5 universe. I'm on Twitter at @MacVittie, and I, love to hear from people, and that's always a good place to start if you, need a more direct answer or, want to start a conversation.
Well, I love chatting with you today. Yes, about hybrid work, IP-based access, identity being the way forward, growing an understanding around identity beyond people to the workloads, applications and devices that we rely on. But more than anything, just for taking the time to share your personal story, your origin story, and even leaving us with a Pantera track too. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
How cool is Laurie? I could have just chatted to hours with her, not just about hybrid work and F5 and technology, but about so much other stuff, from music to geeky topics and everything in between. So a huge thank you to Laurie for sharing her expertise, her insights. And now I want to invite you to do the same. Simply send me a quick email, techblogwriter@outlook.com. If you've got any questions, slide into the DMs on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram @Neil C. Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So today we were talking about hybrid workforce and technologies that support it and securing that and identity-centric security, more importantly. So what we're going to talk about tomorrow? Yes, we're going to spin the wheel once again. Where it stops, nobody knows, but that will be tomorrow's topic. But I'm not going to tell you where it's going to end or what we're going to talk about. For the answer to that, you need to join me again bright and early tomorrow, where I'll be waiting in your podcast feeds with another guest. So a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.